So the very first sentence that you have for parts 3, 4, and 5 should be like a topic sentence or an introductory sentence that tells me what you're going to be focusing on. Remember that this is an application paragraph. We're applying a concept from a moral theory to a practical problem. So questions that you can answer to help you formulate your sentence include: which moral concepts will you apply in the paragraph that you're working on? So, of course, which moral concepts, which words name fundamental and powerful concepts you'll be applying that you introduced in paragraph 1? And what character trait will you be focusing on in applying the moral concepts? So, to flesh out and to answer those questions, what you want to do is look at what I have for each part of the paragraph. So focus on the first 2 bullets to answer those questions, and then be very explicit. One thing that I haven't stated so far, well, at least with this part in parts 3, 4, and 5, is that I want you to use the word I sometimes. So you can say something like, in this paragraph, I will do X and Y, or in this paragraph, I will focus on doing on something, something, something. All right. So of course, you're telling me what you're going to do, so I want you to use I, but of course you're going to be thinking through Aristotle's concepts. So again, remember how important it is to reflect intellectual empathy in doing so. So your topic sentence should have the word I, because you're telling me what you, the philosopher student, will be doing, what intellectual moves you will be making, what it is that you're going to be doing with respect to some concepts in a moral theory and a character trait vis-a-vis a practical application. And so again, I should see attention to the following questions in your topic sentence, your introductory sentence. That will be: which moral concepts will you apply? What character trait will you be focusing on in doing so? And what practical problem? This should be very succinct. You might need 2 sentences, but a lot of you can get this done in 1 sentence. Again, go to step 2, the outline, parts 3, 4, and 5, and then go to step 8D, and look at what I said in the first 2 bullets for each of those parts to answer the question, what should be in my introductory sentence. Again, 2 should be max. Do not discuss the concepts in those sentences. All you're doing is telling me which concepts you're going to apply to which character trait, and then just, remind us of what the topic is, who it is we're focusing on, what group of people. Okay, so you should have written down notes for this part. If you want help from me, or if you want me to look at your topic sentence, you will first have to send me your notes for this, and you should have this down here. If you do not have access to a printer, then what you'll have to do is you'll have to copy everything on this document and then put your notes in the appropriate place. Okay, so now what we're going to focus on is what we just focused on was the first bullet for each of these parts 3, 4, and 5. What we're now going to focus on is the second bullet for each part. So the definition part, as you can see. So that's the next move you're going to make. And really, the first sentence is kind of like an overall essay, composition move. You're signaling to the reader what you're going to be focusing on specifically in each paragraph. The second bullet is where you're actually starting to make the intellectual, methodological moves from the standpoint of Aristotle's ethics, and hence the method of reasoning from the extremes, and hence thinking philosophically through something. All right, so back to our handout. We are now at the second point. So now what you will do is you will, after you've constructed your topic sentence or transitional sentence for each paragraph, then you're going to construct 2 more sentences. So now we're at the point of the definition sentences. So as you can see, you must have 2 definitions for each trait. So 2 definitions for cowardice, 2 for courage, 2 for hardiness. Sources: each definition from a dictionary, from the approved list. In other words, each definition must come from one of the dictionaries that you see in, it's either step 4 or step 5. And note that I added 2 more dictionaries, okay? Significance: find the most, here's an added requirement. I do not want both of your definitions from the same dictionary. So what I would like for you to do is find one definition in one of the dictionaries in the list, and I believe there are 5, and then pick another definition from another dictionary in the list. So that's really important. Each definition Oh, I do say that, so I'm just elaborating on that. Okay, so significance. Find the most useful definitions given the practical context of what you wrote for part 2. So what is part 2? Remember, you should already have this done. Part 2 is where you talk about the non-moral elements of your essay. That is what it is that nurses were going through during COVID-19, whether it's physical, economic, psychological, physiological, medical, whether it had to do with emotions, feelings, threats, or problems. When you're looking for a definition for courage, don't just pick the first one you see. The first one might be very useful, but you want to keep in mind, what is a definition that I can really use for the character trait I'm focused on to talk about what it might have been like, or to demonstrate that maybe a nurse that I found a story about reflected a particular character trait. So the most useful definition, sometimes when I have students define terms or find definitions and then apply them, they pick definitions that aren't best suited for the practical context or for what the topic that follows will be. So for example, when I have epistemology in my intro class, I'll ask students to define justification. And what they need to do, since we're in epistemology, is find definitions for justification that have to do with truth, belief, or knowledge. And what some will do is talk about justification in terms of the legal context or the judicial context. And so that definition that has to do with the legal or judicial context for justification isn't directly helpful and relevant to talking about knowledge, epistemological concerns. So keep in mind the practical consequence, context, paragraph 2, when you are selecting your definitions. This is really important. So you can see here we're outlining the conditions, the requirements for your definitions. Oh, this is extremely important. No version of the word you're trying to define can be in the definition itself. So we're going to be looking at that. Sometimes you'll find a definition that has really good information and useful concepts in it, but it'll have a version of the word you're trying to define. So for example, when you're looking for the word, you're looking for definitions for cowardice, it might say someone who acts like a coward. That would be a terrible definition. You shed no light in that definition on what it means to reflect cowardice. You might find a definition that does have the word cowardice for coward, but there might also be other useful bits. And what you can do is omit the part of the definition that has the word that you're trying to define in it. But you have to be careful with syntax, and I'll cover this later in the video or another video. So you really want to put lots of exclamation marks. Okay, so for example, you put, for example, when trying to define cowardice, no version of the word coward can be in the definition. Okay, so that's very important. That is a tautology. If you do that, you don't do that in philosophy. Okay, formatting and punctuation. Present the definition from the dictionary in quotation marks, no paraphrasing. So even though I've said in the past to students for various assignments on various topics, I've said cite a definition, what some students do is paraphrase. And I don't want you to look at definitions and paraphrase them for this part of applying the method of reasoning from the extremes. When I say cite, I want you to quote. So you should have a definition from 2 different paragraphs in quotation marks. That said, you should not put the word that you are defining in the quotation marks. Put only the definition itself. And I will show you some additional requirements in this video or another video in terms of how you set up in a philosophical manner a word that you're about to introduce and the definition in terms of syntax and punctuation and whatnot. Which brings us to writing skills, syntax, and flow. You're going to use proper introductory clauses to set up and fluidly introduce the definition. So down here, you need to make sure that you write that you cannot just plop down a definition. Okay, so you can't just start off with the definition in quotation marks. You have to have an introductory clause. Also, what some students do is they will put the definitions in a list. I do not want the definitions in the list. I want you to show me that you can use good basic syntax writing skills to introduce a definition and embed it in a fluid way into your discussion, into your paragraph or a paragraph or set of paragraphs. Also, so this means, of course, you might want to write down another warning. Do not place your definitions anywhere else but after your topic sentence. Your definitions must come immediately after your introductory sentence, your topic sentence, where you tell me what you're going to be doing in that paragraph. So don't change the order, and definitely do not put your definitions in a list above the paragraph. The definitions themselves they're not like side notes. By the way, here's how I'm defining something. Defining the character traits is itself an important philosophical move. It's part of the process of doing virtue ethics and reasoning from the extremes. Therefore, it has to be integral to your paragraph. It has to be in your paragraph, and it has to be embedded in a fluid way into the discussion. Okay, so other definition requirements presented verbally only. If I think of any more, or if I make any additional comments while working through examples, you might want to write these down. But in another video, what I'm going to do is go through at least one example of how to do what I'm asking you to do for parts 3, 4, and 5.